It shouldn't really matter too much. That recording has just started. So with Formula Student taking a very different format in 2020, because unfortunately, due to the global pandemic, we are unable to all pile into Silverstone and have a great 4 days of action and entertainment and education as well. And we've decided as Formula Student not to cancel the event altogether. As you know, we're going with a virtual event, and that's raised some interesting and different challenges for you all, but no less entertaining from a challenge point of view, and no less worthy of the learning benefit you're going to get out of it. But because things are different, we are putting on these judges forums, and you'll be able to hear now from the different judges about what's different about Formula Student 2020 and what's key information. Now, we did one of these sessions yesterday, and some of the information that came out from at least one of the judges, I know for a fact, and possibly from the other 2 as well that you're about to hear from, was extraordinarily useful. Let me put it that way. So make sure you take notes and disseminate this information you get today to the rest of your team members. But coming up first, of course, is the head judge of Formula Students, is Mr. Neil Anderson. Neil, what have you got to tell us?
Good morning, everybody. So thank you very much for joining into this session. And in essence, we're going to spend 10 to 15 minutes going through a few key points about the design judging process. There'll be a few hints and tips at the end, and hopefully you'll gain some value out of this to see where you go. So for anybody who doesn't know me, my name is Neil Anderson. I've been the head design judge doing this now for probably close on 20 years, which I'm sure some of you might agree is far too long. But we'll go through a number of bits and pieces, and we'll see if you've got anything that crops up you haven't seen before. So if you want to go to the next slide, Lucy, please. It'll get there eventually. So this is one of the good things about technology. We can figure out how it works on the fly. So as Sam was saying, this is an educational experience, and for anybody who's actually been doing any work over the last few months, a lot of it has been happening online with all these sorts of very real problems. We'll figure it out, and we'll come through it in a minute. So I suppose the few key points really are that although you may originally have planned to enter with a running vehicle, ultimately this year everyone is being judged against the single same score sheet, and that has 2 main components to it. So we're looking at your conceptual design, but in addition you must have a plan for how you'll progress that to a running car in 2021. And that's part of the key point really, that you're all getting judged in the same vein. Brilliant. We've now got a few things that will help to remind all of us what we've got. And to remind you that the Q&A sessions which are coming up, they will operate following the score sheet categories. So what we've done in order to give you the maximum possible benefit of your time and interaction with the judges, we've split the score sheet into 5 very broad categories that you're now hopefully quite familiar with, A to E. In turn, we've allocated a judge in each team dedicated to each of those category sections. So you will pair your student expert in category A, for example, with our judge expert in category A. And something you may not have quite fully understood, despite the published information, is that those 5 20-minute sessions will happen simultaneously. So if your time slot is 9 o'clock, at 9 o'clock, 5 separate Teams calls, meetings, whatever you want to call them, will occur, labelled A to E. We have had a few teams that say they haven't got 5 students available for various reasons. If that's the case, and as a courtesy, whoever is going to be doing perhaps 2 of those sessions needs to let us know somehow, so that the judges can be prepared for you to spend 10 minutes, for example, in category A, close that call, disappear, come back into category C, for example, and spend 10 minutes in there. Quite clearly, in 10 minutes, you're probably not going to get the same opportunity to score points as someone who spends 20 minutes in each session. The idea of that is that you get 100 minutes of our time, which hopefully makes up for the fact that we're not there in person. And as with all these things, we are hoping that you can be as organized as possible. You probably might even want to practice these sort of things. If you are continually during this 20-minute session having to flick around, share your screen, search for documents on your laptop, for example, you're not going to make the best use of it. And to give you an idea, we're probably not looking at the finest of details here. In 20 minutes on those sessions, we're not going to get down to absolute minute detail. As we'll come to in a bit, what we want to see is your fundamental reasoning and understanding, because this is educational. The judges are older and wiser, for sure they're older, and the idea is that they can pass on some of their wisdom of experience to yourselves. And what I would suggest, if you want to sort of show things, is that you either have something already organized so it's very quick and simple, or print it out so you can literally just hold up a piece of A4 paper to the camera. That is probably going to be the quickest and simplest way for you to get your message across. What we don't want is a slick presentation. You've already given us the presentation. We are expecting to have a sort of 20-minute wisdom sharing session, to give it a sort of better title. So that's a bit of advice really there. I think we had a question from somebody after yesterday as to when they would get feedback on their presentation reviews. So just for clarity, you've had the feedback on your design report. It came through to you several weeks ago. The next feedback you get will be the Sunday night of the event, where you will get your complete score sheet that contains all of the feedback in all of those 5 categories from the judges who have seen your report, they've looked at your presentations, and they've dealt with you one-to-one on the 20-minute Q&A call. Those Q&A calls will generally be 1 judge and a maximum of 3 students, okay? And from time to time, one of us head judges may drop in to get an idea how things are going, and the lead judge of each design group may also drop in. So the idea of that is to make it as fair and consistent as possible for everybody. As ever, we will do our best to assemble the results in a timely manner, in a fair and equitable manner by the Saturday evening. And the current plan is to have a design final on the Saturday evening. And as usual, teams involved in that could be 3, could be 5, but that will be decided and those will be notified. The aim is to notify them by around about 4:45 British summer time on the Saturday evening. Okay. It'll be in the final timetable that's distributed, so no worries about that. Now, a few tips. We have read more design reports over the last 10 years, perhaps, than most people would care to. And the bottom line is that students are very keen to dive straight into the detail. I'm not sure if that's the teaching approach, I'm not sure if that's enthusiasm, but our main focus has to be on how you've arrived at your decisions. So we want to see that you've followed a logical process with balanced choices based on proper engineering fundamental principles and consistent with your chosen overall concept. Logical means exactly that. Balanced means that you show us the good points and the bad points. We're well aware that you highlight all the good things where you've chosen something, but we also need to see that you've taken some notice of the drawbacks. So for example, if you've got a big aerodynamics package, then yes, the hope is it's going to give you some downforce that increases your overall grip and reduces your lap times. But the downsides are generally mass, inertia, cost, raised center of gravity, even maybe difficulties transporting the thing. So we need to see that you've got a balanced set of choices. I'll just let Ollie have a word, seeing as he's stuck his hand up and he can throw a few words in. Ollie is our deputy judge.
Come on.
Yep, I can hear you.
Oh, can you?
Yep.
Oh yeah, sorry, yeah, just on that point, just to build on what Neil was saying, you might be able to pull the wool over like 1 or 2 of our eyes, but you won't be able to pull the wool over all of our eyes. And we want to know all the ins and outs of what you've done, how you've come to your design that you presented to us, and also the mistakes that you've made. Like, never try and hide a mistake. Show us the mistakes you've made and tell us how you overcame them and how you then built on those in your design, in your presentations, because that way we really generate a really good understanding of your understanding, and that's the main thing that we're trying to get is we want to know what you know and how you came to your final design. So yeah, I'll just add that to what Neil said.
Great, thanks, Ollie. So as Ollie sort of makes it clear, and I hope we've made it crystal clear here, we're really interested in why and how you came to a decision. That's far more important than describing what you did. So in a very simple way, I always suggest that the Formula Student rules set a series of questions which you must answer. And there is no single correct answer, because that's all very much contextual to your resources, your knowledge. But all of that starts with, what are you actually trying to achieve? And more than probably 80% of the time in looking through the design reports, and to some extent the design presentation reviews, that simplistic bit at the beginning hasn't really been stated. What are you actually looking to achieve? Because only then can you aim your final design at it. And from our perspective, it's probably even one step higher up than the actual vehicle parameters, which is to set yourself some specific performance targets based on your research, benchmarking, everything. And then you go through the process of looking at all the options, good and bad points of each, and then you pick the final one, and you tell us in detail then how and why that works for you. So a simple example, you can go through the past results and you can potentially pick out performance parameters, the acceleration time, for example, economy, point score that you're aiming at. And you can look at that because there's plenty of information in past entries, handbooks, the internet, for you to arrive at what could be reasonable for someone with your budget, your resources, your skill set. From that, you can perhaps define the car parameters, mass, power, grip. You can even look at track width, how that relates to the tilt table test in the rules, for example, center of gravity height. And you can look at what ways you can have of generating the power you need to achieve that performance. Internal combustion engine, electric vehicle, two-wheel drive, four-wheel drive, etc. And even if, for example, your university outlaws point blank you doing an EV because of the electrical safety officer implications, you need to spend 2 or 3 lines showing us that you considered it, and that ultimately, no matter how good it may have been, it was completely outlawed by the policies and protocols behind the scenes at your university. That's fine. It's a valid reason as any. And then you can go through the things, an aero pack. Is that a good idea? If you look at the costs that some people have stated for their aero pack and the mass, it seems that it's about 10% of your weight budget, is 10% of your cost budget. Is it going to give you a 10% improvement overall? I think that is possibly difficult to prove, and therefore you need to prove it to us fairly explicitly. So that is the key things that we're looking at. And then you go through and you can then look at how you reduce that down to the type of structure, the type of power unit, what brakes, how you're going to fit the steering mechanism in the cockpit along with the driver and meet the template rules, safety implications, and all that sort of thing. And let's not forget also, in what you're trying to achieve, you need to tell us the sort of target customer price tag sort of area that you're aiming at. And everything should be consistent across the board. And just to recap quickly on the 5 score sheet categories, I can understand that teams may have difficulty thinking, for example, oh, where does my wonderfully brilliant, really clever, ultra lightweight but mega downforce producing aero pack fit within those 5 categories? I would suggest that it probably has implications across all 5. It's primarily as an idea going to fit within the overall concept. That's probably where you're going to show us from a simulation perspective that it actually works and that you can negate the issues of mass, inertia, center of gravity height. Structurally, it's going to require some significant thinking, both at detail of joints and point loads. And then it's going to have an implication on your powertrain, because for sure it's going to out drag and it's going to knock economy. Planning, I suspect that you've probably got to come up with a way of molding it, so you can't actually have the part on the car until you've made it. And design for manufacture, there's a number of things in an aero pack that would cause you to think carefully about how you will actually make it. I know that Ollie will be itching to butt in and sort of suggest that the starting point for any aero pack should be an underfloor diffuser. I suspect in terms of money, benefits against the weight, where the weight is, he'd be 100% bang on with that. So I don't want to take up any more of your time. I do appreciate that you've joined in to listen to this, and we do look forward to seeing you all at Silverstone. Sorry, we can't see you all at Silverstone. We look forward to seeing you in a virtual world that replaces being at Silverstone. I'll hand you back to Sam, and he can tidy up the housekeeping. Thank you.
Thank you, Neil. Tidying up housekeeping. I've never been particularly good at that, but I've always been quite messy. But nonetheless, being messy is not what the judges will want to see. They'll want to see you getting everything together and in a good way. But if you listen to some of those points that Neil just made about some of those little challenges you might be facing with this new format, do take those to heart. Listen to it and don't overcomplicate things. Do what he says. He knows what he's doing, as do all of the judges at Formula Student. And one of the important things about the Formula Student judges is they're big industry professionals. These are guys who know what their jobs are. They don't just come from the world of Formula One, though many of them do. Some come from other areas of motor racing, some come from the nuclear industry, and some come from other areas of engineering and indeed in business in general. And these are big people that you'll probably encounter somewhere along the line in your career. So don't forget, these people are watching you to assess you for how good you individually are, as well as your team and your project are. And we'll hear a little bit more about how you're going to be assessed. We're going to be hearing now from John Dangerfield about the cost section of the competition. But before I throw to John, I'd just like to point out, unfortunately, due to the sort of timescales we have with this judges forum, it's not possible for us to take questions directly to the judges today, but it's not impossible for you to be able to get those questions across to them, and we will endeavour to get those answers back to you. I'll give the details at the end of the session, and so keep a pen and paper for those, though you probably already have the details already. So, John, let's hear from you about the cost section of the competition.
Hi, Sam. Thanks very much. Okay, so we've only got 15 minutes, so I'll try and cram in as much information as I can. I'm going to give you some tips, some pointers. I don't want to tell you too much because I don't want to spoil actually taking part in the event for you as well. So there will be some little tidbits in there. Try and learn from those. And then also on the day, of course, treat it as a great opportunity to have a dialogue with some clever people. And a lot of our judges that we've got this year with the virtual event, without exception, all of them have done it before. Some of them, this is their 20th year. They've been literally doing it since the beginning of Formula Student. So there's a whole wealth of experience there. Quick introduction. Why are we doing this virtual event? There's other competitions around the world that's just cancelled the event completely and not doing anything virtual. I think that would be a real great shame if we don't try and impart at least a little bit of knowledge to you guys before you go out into the real world. And also, mainly as well, because we're going to keep everything static, for 2021, use it as a stepping stone so that our 2021 cost packs and design packs and business packs and dynamics and everything else, you get a springboard effect so we can have the best possible event we can have next year. Just a couple of things that's changed from the cost event from last year. You may have noticed, hopefully, if you've submitted your documents, that we've gone to an online bill of materials tool, a BOM tool. That's a big learning curve for us as well. I think what we've found with that is there's little glitches within the system, little things that we can change and we can adapt for next year. So if you haven't already given your feedback on that, please do send it through the usual streams, through the FSQD or through the Formula Student account. And then we can hopefully develop that and it can be even better for 2021. Also this year, there's more points available for the cost event, and also I'm sure, as Mark will talk to you later, that's an increase in business and actually in design as well, but probably not as big a proportion. So all the static events have increased their points. So it's now a 60-40 split, and the reason we've done that is because we believe the statics are so important to your future careers and what you will do. So that basically is rewarding your efforts in these areas. So think about that, because you know it's still very important to get the dynamic scores, but actually it's just as important now to focus on the statics. The only other thing that we've changed from this year, and it's slightly different from some of the other European events, is we've included CapEx costs within your cost explanation file. And the reason we've done that is we think it's more in keeping with the real world, and it will give you that level of experience for when you do get out into the real world and you're challenged to do cost estimations for any project that you might be on. The key thing for us here is just because we're building a racing car, a prototype racing car, the knowledge is completely transferable. Like Sam was saying, it's not just if you're going to go into racing, if you're going to go into F1. I buy facilities management and building support and all sorts of other different things. But it's the same skill set that I was doing when I was doing Formula Student back in 2002. So you'll learn all these little tricks and tips, and then you can apply them. And I guarantee in every interview that you will go in your life, even me a couple of years ago with this job, I was using Formula Student and my experience there as an example. So I think it's really important to sort of bear that in mind. Right, let's get to the actual event that we'll be doing now. So essentially, in previous years, you will have had an hour's judging. This is dropped down to 30 now. Now, that's not dissimilar to some of the events around the world. The Americans actually do their cost judging in 30 minutes. So it is going to be quicker. It's going to be a lot more focused. But what that means is that you're going to need to be a lot more assertive with the way you interact with the judges. So every minute that you're going to spend needs to count double this year. So you've got to think about what can I say and how can I say it in the most informative, assertive way without any fluff around that conversation. So really focus and think about how I can do that. Pausing and having to find documents and everything is just going to kill your time. So have all that prepped and rehearsed and have go-to answers. You know there's going to be questions that we're going to be asking you. So think about those questions. You know, how are you going to cut? How are you going to save money in a particular area? How are you going to justify the cost, the value for money? What other manufacturing techniques could you do if you were to go to mass production? Think about these things and have them ready to go so you can fire them out at the judges. And that's what will unlock the top end of the points. Okay, so it's in two parts, the cost judging this year. The first part is going to be your C-bomb and the second part is your special task. Roughly between 10 or 15 minutes on each part. If we focus now on the C-bomb, now unfortunately you can't change any of your documentation. That's all been submitted. So what you've done, you've done. But you can change the way you interact with your judges and the conversations that you have with them. Again, remember, we're not testing about the actual building of a racing car. That's just a tool or a mechanism to get the information out onto the page. Think about how you've put that information into your C-bomb, how you've detailed it, and to what degree you've broken down all the subsections. Now, we've seen an array of different cost reports that have come in, specifically on the C-bomb from 3 pages, just for the frame and body, which is what we've asked for this year, 3 pages of data, up to 100 pages of data. Now, probably the 3 pages is too little. The 100 pages is maybe detailed, but maybe a touch too much. There's probably a happy medium somewhere in the middle. So have a think about that. Talk about with your judges. Try and derive some examples from them. I know we shared some examples at Learn to Win this year as well. And think about how can I make that the best it can possibly be for 2021, and also try and get that understanding from the judges from this year as well. We're also going to be asking you within this section to talk about how you would switch from a prototype manufacturing technique to a mass production technique. So where you've designed your frame and body, for instance, maybe as a space frame, how would you do that if we were going to ask you to produce 10,000 cars, 30,000, 50,000, 100,000? How would your manufacturing change? How would your approach to the supply chain change? And what would you do differently to make that as profitable as possible for your pretend company? What else do I need to talk to you about? So that's the C-bomb side of it, and you can talk with your judges. I think one of the most important documents within our cost packs is the cost explanation file. And the reason I think that's important is that's where you're going to derive a lot of your real world understanding and learning, and why we've added in the R&D and the CapEx costs as an option for that, because I think that's where you'll find a lot of the hidden costs. So again, you'll see a whole range of different examples of teams that have maybe just put a couple of pages, and teams that have really put a lot of effort into this document. There's many ways, and there isn't necessarily a right or wrong answer, but there are real world examples and realistic examples that you can use as well. So have you approached this with trying to amalgamate all your costs into a single labour rate per hour? Have you depreciated your equipment correctly? Have you thought about your labour force? Have you literally just done it as they work 40 hours a week? Do you have non-productive time in there? All these sort of functions, and if these words or these phrases don't mean anything to you, this is the thing that you've got to derive from the judges, okay? And ask them what their experiences are and what pressures that they've had in their industry, and they'll be more than happy to share this with you. In fact, one of the things that I missed at the beginning of your judging session that I would recommend to any team is to ask the judges at the beginning, what do you, so you can have that quick 2 minutes while you're going through the basics and the introductions to really solidify in your own mind how you're going to present this in the most effective way to the judges, and really get them thinking about, how can I give this team the maximum possible points? What else do I need to do? Oh, right. So there is one of the document set that you need, and that is your drawing pack. Again, too late for this year if you've submitted it, but ask the judges why and what they want to see within this. For me, and it's very different and it's a personal preference, so you have to be able to be prepared to cover all bases. I want to see an exploded drawing of the part that we're talking about, so I can conceptualize what's involved within that section of the car, and actually then look at the detail of it from there on. Now, of course, we haven't got your physical cars this year, so one of the things that we'll be asking you to do is basically refer to parts of your documentation as we go along. Now, the important thing is you've got to know that documentation inside and out, because we've had a limited time to review all this. So if we say, can you take us to the section that involves, I don't know, your engine mount tabs or something like that, you need to be able to go to that page really quickly and justify that you know what's in there. So have a think about that and know your data inside out before you go into it. Finally, okay, so I think that covers everything on the CBOM side of it. For the second part of cost judging this year, we've asked you to do a special task. Now, this is completely different to what we've done in the last 3 or 4 years, but not completely different to anybody that recognises when we were on the old Now, what we've asked you to do this year is quite pertinent to what's been going on in the real world. So we basically asked you to consider that you're a successful race team that also manufactures bespoke race cars for exclusive clients, and that you've been approached by your country's regional government in a time of crisis to support the European effort to overcome the virus pandemic. Please can you make a proposal how you will ramp down vehicle manufacturing and ramp up production of PPE and ventilator parts to help with the pan-European effort. Now, that's quite specific. A lot of the people on this call now, and also as part of the cost judges, with the Formula One teams, and I personally did that as well. We had to drop everything and start doing things that were completely different to what we were doing in the past. Now, you can approach this in many, many different ways, and that's the beauty of what we're doing. Again, you can't change your presentations and the videos and what you've done, but you can change the way you interact with the judges and try and mitigate some of the things that you may have put down in there, or you might like to change as a result of conversations you've had or even listening to this. So what I would say to you is try and think about, if you were putting this together, what you would already have in your factory if you were doing that sort of business already for exclusive clients. So for an exclusive race cars, you're going to have some of the high-end machinery, like rapid prototyping, like CNC machining. Those sort of things are going to be on hand. So how can you ramp that down and ramp it up quickly to start producing these parts? Flip side of that is, how are you going to get your supplies in? So this was a real difficult concept for us. A lot of our supplies were coming direct from China. China was closed. We couldn't get anything out. Cargo was a nightmare. So how are you going to try and get that? Have you got stockpiles? Can you engage it from other sectors that are not trading at that time? These sort of things were key challenges to actually turning around and getting a successful result. Two other things, you've got legal constraints on you. So if you're in lockdown, it means all your workforce are locked down as well. But because you're doing things for government, how would you actually get them back into work in a legal and compliant manner? And if it's a compliant manner, how are you going to guarantee their safety? Do they need masks? Do they need to be physically separated? And also, what about their personal welfare? So they're in lockdown, so it's going to be challenging. It's unprecedented. What do you need to consider with regards to them covering families? That means you're going to need to change your workload, your work times. How does that all factor in? Have a think about this, because that's what the judges will have been dealing with. And while I'm talking about this as well, and welfare of imaginary personnel, don't forget the welfare of your own team in the real world. This is a really tricky time, and our mental health can go in completely the different directions. So make sure that you're looking after your team in this as well, because we're all going to be missing Silverstone this year, and it's going to affect us in different ways. And don't just focus on the team members that are quiet. Make sure the noisy ones are looked after as well, because they can be reacting in different ways. So really think about looking after your team. I think that's really important. The other thing, and this was a bit telling from what we saw and what I've read. Some of you have proposed quite high profits from some of the parts that you will do in this. If, say, for instance, you're proposing to make 100%, 200%, 400% more profit from this, it's maybe not the right time to do it, and you may be price gouging a little bit there. So it might be something that you might want to say, this is what we could do, but of course in the real world, when we're all in this together, maybe profit margins aren't as important as actually getting the stuff out quickly and just covering your own costs. Maybe something to think about, and I'm sure the judges will have a lot of time to talk to you about that as well. So that brings me to the end of the conversation that we have. Just some final tips. The BOM tool and the PDFs that we've created from it, make sure you know those packs inside out. Make sure you can recall the information as quickly as you can, because that will save you, that's dead time that you can actually then use having a dialogue with the judges and get those higher points. Make sure you use this as a stepping stone to 2021. We all can't wait to be physically back and looking at your amazing cars. Some of the 3D renders that I've seen are absolutely fantastic, and you have no excuse to get these cars done, tested, and perfect for 2021 now. So don't back off on the pressure of that as well. And also, please try and have some fun with this. We're all stuck behind a PC. We're all looking after our families and our children. So let's try and have some fun with it and treat it as the Formula Student family it is, and support each other. And hopefully, if I don't see you at the virtual event, I'll definitely see you at our next physical event. So I'll pass you back to Sam.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, John. And I think that is absolutely, I hope you were all taking notes, because there were some brilliant tips in there. And I think some of the tips raised eyebrows a little bit we got in that section. So I really do hope you were listening to that. Now, as I say, there's not going to be an opportunity to ask these judges questions directly, but you are going to be able to get those questions to them via the FSQD and some of the other details I'll give you at the end of the meeting. But without further ado, because I'm going to talk a little bit about what John said at the end of the next presentation as well, because I think it ties in quite neatly, I'd like to hear from Mark Hassel about the business presentation.
Thank you very much, Sam. Mark Hassel here. I'm the head judge for the business presentation event. First thing, I just want to echo all the things that John, Neil and Sam have said so far. Formula Student isn't going ahead in the way we really wanted it to go ahead, but for us, we view it as important that it goes ahead and you have an event as an educational benefit. John mentioned and Neil have mentioned that many of the skills you will pick up here are not just relevant to motorsport. Personally, the last time I was involved with motorsport was in 2006 as a Formula Student competitor. Since then, I've worked in completely separate industries, had nothing to do with motorsport, but I've applied the lessons I learned at Formula Student on probably a daily basis. So moving on to the next slide, please, Lucy, and another one. So I want to just focus on some of the logistics of what's going to happen during the event. We've got live questions and answer sessions. You're aware of that. You should have all had a call as to what time your session is. And this is just what's going to happen when we have that event. So once we've all joined that call, the first 10 minutes is going to be re-watching the presentations you have already submitted. So you've put your presentations in as PowerPoints, as videos. Thank you. Some fantastic work gone on there. The judges will play those, and that's just to refresh everybody's memory as what your presentation was, because it will be, you know, several weeks since you actually submitted it. So you might need a refresh. We'll then ask 5 minutes of questions and answers based on your presentation. So that's the interactive bit. We can probe a bit deeper into some of the areas you've highlighted. We can check your understanding if you actually know what you've talked about, or have you copied something straight off Wikipedia. And then we'll give you 5 minutes of feedback as to how you've done in your presentation. So crucially there, you are not expected to deliver your presentation again. You have done that. We've got a recording of it. It's done. Don't worry about that. We do request, though, that you bring along a copy of your slide pack or any materials you've submitted to support that you can share on the screen if needs be. So if a judge suddenly says, can I ask you a question about what's on slide 7? We're not having to go through a video, or it's not an automated presentation where we've then got to try and pause it and stop it. You can just go to slide 7 and we can talk about it. And one of the other parts there, it says the judges will record the questions and answer sessions. I'll explain that a bit further in a second. Okay, next slide, please, Lucy. So the scoring of the event. We score over 4 categories: content, visual aids, delivery, and questions and answers. So the scores for the first 3 of those will be based on the recorded presentations you've already submitted. So 80% of the marks that are available have already been decided. The judges are going through the presentations now, and they are scoring them. I want to say there are some fantastic presentations in there. Thank you. Some people have really done well at this. I do need to point out, some people didn't really read the guidance that we asked beforehand, and you're going to be a bit disappointed with your scores. I need to be honest. But these live sessions are only going to score marks in the questions and answer session. So 80% of your marks have already been decided. On that, we also say that there is no live final taking place this year. Last few years, we've had the top between 3 and 5 teams represent to everybody. That can't happen this year, as you can imagine. We considered it. We thought it wasn't going to work well. So what will happen is that a single panel of judges will go back and rescore those top scoring teams who would have been finalists. So that's part of the reason as to why we are recording the questions and answer sessions, so they can be reviewed later on. Want to add on to the scores, like John mentioned, we've upped the number of points available here. Last year, the business presentation was worth 75 marks in the overall competition. This year, it's worth 120 marks. That's a 60% increase. So we are trying to really make it clear that this is an event is not just about building a racing car. The business presentations are a crucial part of any future engineer's career. Okay, next slide, please, Lucy. So these are the people who are involved. Only the competitors who you identified as being your presenters on your submitted presentations can answer questions. If you've got a whole panel of experts that you want to answer questions and you didn't tell us you want to use a panel of experts in your presentation, we're not going to listen to them. We're not even going to talk to them. Sorry, your presenters are answering the questions. Similarly, to reduce the demand on bandwidth and help keep everything going slowly, we request that no spectators come along. I know some of the events you'll have more people involved, but please keep it to just the presenters if possible. And the judges who will be asking the questions are the same judges who will have scored your presentation. So they'll have seen your presentation, they'll know a little bit about it, and they will have come up with their questions. What's going to happen after the event? Well, our scores will be announced. The winner will be announced at the MathWorks closing party on the Sunday evening, and further results will be released after that. We are producing written feedback forms, and the recordings of the live sessions will be made available on request after the competition. Please don't all ask for them on the Monday. You're not going to have them all on the Monday. There's going to be a bit of admin work to do and catch up there. I think that should be my last slide, Lucy. Other than that, I just want to say good luck to everybody. Well done. There's been some fantastic work done so far. I look forward to seeing more fantastic work next week and some fantastic presentations. And back over to you. Thanks, Sam.
Well, thanks for that, Mark. Just before we get going on just the response to that, just to remind everybody that if you haven't got your university name in the chat box, then please do make sure you get it in before this session closes in a few minutes. We certainly haven't heard enough yet from the National University of Science and Technology in Pakistan, so we just need to check that they're there as well. But moving on, I mean, there are quite a lot of interesting points that Mark and John particularly just made there that I think you all need to take away and have a good hard think about. Particularly, there was a lot of reference to the real world. Remember, the real world, that's what you need to be thinking about. Yes, it's a virtual competition, but it's being assessed in a real world way of doing things. And although we're talking to each other over a computer screen and a microphone, you're going to have some of those real world problems that a lot of us in industry are experiencing at the moment. Will you have an internet breakage? Will your signal not be quite as good like mine hasn't been today? Is your microphone good enough? Is everybody in your team knowing who needs to be in which meeting at which time? You need to have all of that sorted out. Make sure you've got your Wi-Fi connection sorted and you know when to mute your microphones and your video and when not, because you don't want to be caught out. You don't be the person typing when they're not muted and thinking that you should be muted. And then there's a few other notes for the competition itself that is well worth looking at. Read the advice that was sent to all the teams just over a week ago now. You will have had it. And it tells you about how to deal with all of this, but also how to get questions in that you may have at this point. Now is the time to get those questions in. So send them to fs@imeki.org or put them on the FSQD. That's really important to know. So you need to be doing that and not wait for that. Also, the virtual dynamics ceremony, the event afterwards is going to be, well, the whole dynamics event is going to be streamed online on YouTube on the 25th of this month and the 26th of this month. And that's going to be on the Formula Student YouTube channel, which we may have a link in the chat shortly on. If not, Google will be your friend. It may also be on something called Twitch, which I'm sure many of you are on. I am also, but we're not sure about that one. And then also there's the MathWorks closing ceremony. Now that really is something not to be missed. You have to sign up for that one, and that's going to start at 5 o'clock UK time on the Sunday of the event. So do make sure you sign up for that, because that's really, really going to be important. All the static events are going to, and Q&As are going to take place on the 23rd and 24th of July, and the invitations to those events have already been sent to your team leaders. Now, if you haven't heard from your team leader when you're expected to be doing stuff, you need to be talking to your team leader pretty quickly, because you need to get that sorted. The virtual dynamic events, as you heard, are over the weekend of the 25th and 26th of July and will be live streamed online. 34 teams entered for that, and the entry list you'll have seen probably already. If not, it'll be online somewhere. Also, keep an eye on what's going on in this MathWorks closing ceremony. I can't promote this more strongly, because the whole idea is a bit of a panel discussion around hands-on learning, there's the real world again, in teams to prepare students for success in the workplace, which might not sound like the catchiest thing, but just have a listen to who is on the panel. You've got Dan Jones, who's the chief judge of Formula Student, and he's engineering team leader on the turbocharger for the Mercedes AMG high-performance powertrain. So he's doing those turbos that won the Styrian Grand Prix a few days ago, and will probably win the Hungarian Grand Prix in a few days' time. Chris Lim, an application engineer from MathWorks. Javier Bermejo is an F2 and F3 simulation engineer from Prema Powerteam. And Nick Collett, the chassis design and technology specialist from the Ferrari F1 team. I'm definitely going to be tuning into that, because I want to hear what they've got to say about all of this, because it's going to be super important and great learning for all of you. So make sure you have signed up for that. Now, I think I'm going to thank everybody for attending this event and just give you a few more seconds to get your university team names if you haven't already managed to do that so far. So hopefully you'll be able to get that into the chat box right now. But otherwise, thank you very much for listening in. Make sure you get your questions into the judges via FSQD or the email link I just gave you. And be prepared for the unexpected, because think about what happens if your Wi-Fi network goes down when you're in the middle of a presentation. Do you have a 4G backup that you can just fire up? Can someone just manage that to get going? Do you have everybody in the right place and briefed and ready and aware of what they need to do and when they need to do it? Because time zones for some of you may be a bit of a challenge. All event timings will be in BST, British Summer Time. So that's the current time in London, UK. So if you're unsure, because the UK has British Summer Time and Greenwich Mean Time, it's British Summer Time. So be sure, if you're unsure, go on Google and ask what time is it in London, and that will be the time that we are working to as a competition. So remember, it's UK times for everything, not Central European, not American, not times in Pakistan or Japan. It is the time in London. So make sure you've got that time right. Loughborough University, they're getting in at the last minute. So if anybody else, I'm going to give you about another 10, 15 seconds to put the name of your university into the chat box. Otherwise, good luck with the event. Enjoy it and learn from it, because I think it's going to be fascinating for all of us. I'm going to be there watching the dynamic events with all of you and talking over it. It's going to be great fun. It's going to be very different for me to talk over a virtual event. I normally do real racing cars, so it's going to be quite a learning experience in that sense. But we will be putting together a great competition. So thank you all very much for joining, and we will see you all virtually, at least in a few days' time, and hopefully we will see you all physically in about a year's time at Silverstone in 2021. Thank you.
Thank you.